Sometimes the body declares war on itself, and when it does, you have exactly 7 seconds to decide if you're going to fight or surrender. Meet Tony Raffaaniello, a 65-year-old retired assistant principal and basketball coach from New Jersey. After decades of shaping young minds and coaching winning teams, Tony was finally ready to enjoy retirement with his beloved wife Dale, a dedicated nurse who had spent her career caring for others. Their dream trip to Italy and a Mediterranean cruise was just 2 days away when Tony's world turned upside down. The morning started like any other. Tony woke up excited, his mind already wandering to the cobblestone streets of Sicily and the authentic Italian cuisine he'd soon taste. But instead of packing his suitcase, he found himself doubled over in excruciating pain, his stomach feeling like it was being torn apart from the inside. "Something's terribly wrong," he gasped to Dale, who immediately recognized the severity of his condition. Her nursing instincts kicked in as she rushed him to the hospital where she worked, praying they weren't too late. What happened next would test every fiber of Tony's being and challenge everything he thought he knew about his own strength. In the emergency room, as doctors administered pain medication, Tony suddenly collapsed. The lights went out, and for 10 terrifying days, he existed in a world between life and death, connected to a ventilator while his family held vigil. When Tony finally opened his eyes, the nightmare was far from over. He couldn't move his arms or legs. Simple tasks like holding a phone became impossible mountains to climb. His body had become a stranger to him, and his pancreas, an organ he'd never given much thought to, was slowly disappearing, being consumed by a disease so aggressive that doctors spoke in hushed, worried tones. This is the story of a man who faced the unthinkable and found hope where others saw only darkness. It's about a brilliant surgeon known as Dr. Kim, whose miraculous hands and unwavering determination would prove that sometimes, when traditional medicine says there's no way forward, innovation and compassion can create miracles. If you're facing your own health battle or supporting someone who is, stay with us. Tony's journey will show you that even when your body seems to be failing you, the human spirit, combined with the right medical team, can overcome the impossible. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead as Dale Raffaaniello paced anxiously in the waiting area. Her husband Tony lay on a gurney just beyond the swinging doors, and despite her years as a nurse, she had never felt more helpless. She knew these hallways, these sounds, these smells, but being on the other side of medical care felt like stepping into an alien world. Dr. Sarah Chun, the attending physician, emerged from the treatment room with a grave expression. "Mrs. Raffaaniello, we've given your husband pain medication for what appears to be severe abdominal pain. His vitals are stabilizing, but we're running tests to determine the cause." Dale nodded, her professional composure barely masking her terror. She had seen enough medical emergencies to know when something was seriously wrong, and every instinct screamed that this was one of those times. Inside the treatment room, Tony felt the medication beginning to work, the crushing pain in his abdomen slowly receding to a dull ache. For a moment, he allowed himself to hope that this was just a bad case of food poisoning, something that would pass quickly and let them continue with their travel plans. "How are you feeling, Mr. Raffaaniello?" asked Dr. Chun, checking his chart. "Better," Tony managed to say, though his voice was weak. "Maybe I can go home soon, and—" He never finished the sentence. One moment he was talking, the next he was falling into darkness so complete and sudden that it felt like the world had simply ceased to exist. His body went limp, monitors began shrieking, and suddenly the emergency room erupted into controlled chaos. "Code blue. Code blue." The announcement echoed through the corridors as medical staff rushed toward Tony's room. Dale watched in horror as her husband was wheeled past her, unconscious and surrounded by doctors and nurses working frantically to keep him alive. Dr. Chen's voice cut through the noise. "Get him to the ICU now. His blood pressure is crashing, and his oxygen levels are dropping fast." As Tony disappeared behind the ICU doors, Dale found herself alone in a waiting room that suddenly felt enormous and cold. The retirement they had planned, the trips they would take, the quiet moments they would share, all of it hung in the balance as her husband fought for his life just rooms away. For the next 10 days, Tony existed in a twilight state, his lungs breathing only with the help of a ventilator. Dale never left the hospital, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs and surviving on vending machine coffee and the kindness of her colleagues who brought her meals she barely touched. The medical team worked around the clock, running test after test, trying to understand what was destroying Tony's body from the inside. Blood work revealed elevated enzyme levels, CT scans showed inflammation, and with each passing day, it became clear that whatever was happening to Tony was far more serious than anyone had initially imagined. As the machines continued their rhythmic vigil and Tony fought his silent battle, the medical team prepared to deliver news that would change everything Dale thought she knew about their future together. On the 11th day, something miraculous happened. Tony's eyelids fluttered open, and for the first time in over a week, he saw the world again. But the world he returned to was nothing like the one he had left behind. The first thing he noticed was the tube in his throat, the mechanical sound of the ventilator that had been keeping him alive. Panic set in as he tried to move, tried to call out to Dale, whose tired face appeared above him like an angel's. "Tony, Tony, can you hear me?" Dale's voice was filled with a mixture of relief and fear. She had dreamed of this moment for 10 days, but now that it was here, she realized their journey was just beginning. Dr. Chin appeared beside the bed, her expression cautious but hopeful. "Mr. Raffaaniello, you've been unconscious for 10 days. We're going to remove the ventilator now, but I need you to stay calm and let us help you." As the medical team worked to remove the breathing tube, Tony tried to process what he was hearing. 10 days? It felt like he had just closed his eyes moments ago. But as awareness returned, he began to understand the severity of what had happened to him. The real shock came when he tried to move his arms. Nothing happened. He concentrated harder, willing his muscles to respond, but his limbs felt like they belonged to someone else. His legs were equally unresponsive, and when a nurse placed a cell phone in his hand, it slipped through his fingers like water. "What's wrong with me?" Tony whispered, his voice hoarse from the intubation. Dr. Chin sat down beside his bed, her manner gentle but direct. "Tony, you've suffered from what we believe is acute pancreatitis, a severe inflammation of your pancreas. The condition has affected your entire system, causing muscle weakness and other complications. We're going to transfer you to a rehabilitation center where specialists can help you regain your strength." But there was more, and Tony could see it in her eyes. The worst news was yet to come. "Your pancreas is surrounded by fluid," Dr. Chin continued carefully. "If it becomes infected, you'll need emergency surgery. And I have to be honest with you, it would be a very serious operation." Tony looked at Dale, whose nursing background meant she understood the implications perhaps even better than he did. The pancreas wasn't just any organ. It was essential for digestion and blood sugar regulation. If something was seriously wrong with it, his entire life would change. "If you were in my position," Tony asked Dr. Chin, "what would you do?" Without hesitation, she replied, "I'd get you to the Pancreas Center in New York as soon as possible. They have specialists there who deal with cases like yours every day." As Tony was prepared for transfer to the rehabilitation center, he tried to come to terms with this new reality. The trip to Italy seemed like a distant dream now. His body felt foreign, his future uncertain, and somewhere deep in his abdomen, he could feel that something was terribly, irreversibly wrong. Dale packed their belongings with shaking hands, including the unused plane tickets that now served as a painful reminder of how quickly life could change. She had spent her career helping patients navigate medical crises, but nothing had prepared her for watching the love of her life face his own mortality. As the ambulance doors closed and they began the journey to rehabilitation, neither Tony nor Dale could imagine that their darkest hour would soon lead them to one of medicine's most brilliant minds, a doctor who specialized in finding hope where others saw only despair. 3 weeks later, Tony sat in the waiting room of the Pancreas Center in New York, a shadow of his former self. He had lost 40 pounds, and constant nausea had become his unwelcome companion. Dale helped him fill out paperwork with trembling hands that could barely hold a pen. "Tony Raffaaniello?" called a nurse, and they made their way slowly down a corridor lined with medical diplomas and awards. At the end of the hall, they found themselves face to face with Dr. John Paneros, who would soon become known to Tony as his own personal Dr. Miracle. Dr. Paneros, whom his colleagues had nicknamed Dr. Kim for his methodical precision and innovative techniques, was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and hands that moved with the confidence of someone who had performed thousands of life-saving procedures. He had built his reputation on taking cases that other doctors considered hopeless and finding solutions where none seemed to exist. "Mr. Raffaaniello," Dr. Paneros said, studying Tony's chart, "I've reviewed your case, and I want you to know that while your condition is serious, it's not hopeless. Tell me, how are you feeling right now?" Tony looked up at this doctor, who radiated calm confidence. I've been nauseous for 5 weeks straight. I can't eat, I can't sleep, and I feel like I'm dying a little more each day. Dr. Paneros nodded thoughtfully. What you have is called necrotizing pancreatitis. It's a condition where inflammation causes tissue in the pancreas to die, and in your case, it's moving aggressively. Without intervention, it will consume about 2/3 of your pancreas. Dale gasped, but Dr. Paneros continued with the same steady tone that had calmed countless families before them. Here's what makes your case challenging but not impossible, he explained, pulling up Tony's CT scans on a large monitor. Most doctors would recommend major surgery, opening you up and removing the damaged tissue. It's traumatic, risky, and leaves patients with significant scars and long recovery times. Tony felt his heart sink, but Dr. Paneros smiled. However, that's not how we're going to handle this. I specialize in minimally invasive techniques. We can treat your condition endoscopically, through small incisions and specialized instruments. No major surgery, no large scars, and most procedures can be done on an outpatient basis. For the first time in weeks, Tony felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. Dr. Paneros continued, I'm going to place a series of stents to drain the fluid that's surrounding your pancreas. Think of it like installing small drainage pipes to redirect water away from your home's foundation. Once we control the fluid buildup, your body can begin to heal. What are the risks? Dale asked, her nurse's training making her probe for the complete picture. Every procedure has risks, Dr. Paneros acknowledged, but compared to traditional surgery, they're minimal. Most importantly, I believe we can halt the progression of this disease and help Tony regain a normal quality of life. As they left the office that day, Tony felt lighter than he had in weeks. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone had spoken to him about getting better rather than just surviving. Dr. Paneros hadn't just offered medical treatment. He had offered hope, dignity, and the possibility of reclaiming the life that had been stolen from him. He's going to save me, Tony told Dale as they walked to their car. I can feel it. With a treatment plan in place and hope restored, Tony prepared for a series of procedures that would test not only Dr. Paneros' innovative techniques, but also Tony's own determination to fight for his life. The first procedure was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early July. Tony arrived at the medical center feeling nervous but hopeful, a stark contrast to the despair that had consumed him just weeks earlier. Dr. Paneros met them in the pre-procedure area, his calm demeanor immediately putting Tony at ease. Today we're going to place the first set of stents, Dr. Paneros explained as the nursing team prepared Tony for the procedure. I'll be working endoscopically, which means I'll insert a flexible tube with a tiny camera through your mouth and into your digestive system. From there, I can see exactly what we're dealing with and place the drainage stents precisely where they need to go. Tony marveled at the technology. You mean you can fix me without cutting me open? That's exactly right, Dr. Paneros smiled. Your recovery will be much faster, and you'll be amazed at how different you feel when we remove all that fluid that's been making you sick. The procedure took 2 hours. Tony was under conscious sedation, aware but comfortable, able to hear Dr. Paneros and his team working with the precision of a well-rehearsed orchestra. Through the sedation haze, he could hear the doctor's steady voice providing updates to the surgical team. There's the pancreatic duct, significant inflammation as expected, placing the first stent now. Good position, flow looks excellent. When Tony woke up in recovery, the first thing he noticed was that the crushing nausea that had been his constant companion was noticeably reduced. For the first time in over a month, he felt hungry. How do you feel? Asked Dale, who had been anxiously waiting for news. Different, Tony said, and he meant it. I actually want to eat something. Dr. Paneros appeared in the recovery area, still wearing his surgical scrubs. The procedure went perfectly. I was able to place 3 stents, and we're already seeing excellent drainage. Tony, you should start feeling significantly better over the next few days. True to his word, Tony's improvement was remarkable. Within 48 hours, his nausea had disappeared almost entirely. He was eating solid food for the first time in weeks, and his energy was slowly returning. 2 weeks later, they returned for the second procedure. This time, Tony was less nervous and more curious about the process. Dr. Paneros showed him the imaging from the first procedure, pointing out how the stents were successfully draining fluid and allowing his pancreas to begin healing. See this area here? Dr. Paneros pointed to the scan. This is healthy pancreatic tissue that we've saved. Without intervention, this would have been destroyed by now. The second procedure involved placing additional stents and adjusting the existing ones for optimal drainage. Again, Tony recovered quickly, returning home the same day with instructions to rest and continue his gradual return to normal activities. Over the following months, Tony underwent a total of 5 procedures, each one building on the success of the previous ones. With each visit, Dr. Paneros fine-tuned the stent placement, monitored Tony's healing, and celebrated each milestone in his recovery. The most amazing thing, Tony told friends and family, is that I don't have a single scar on my body. Dr. Paneros performed miracles, and you'd never know I'd been through anything at all. What had started as a life-threatening emergency requiring potential major surgery had been transformed into a manageable condition treated with minimally invasive techniques and remarkable results. As the months passed and Tony's health stabilized, both he and Dr. Paneros began to understand that they hadn't just treated a disease. They had redefined what was possible when innovation met determination. 6 months after his first meeting with Dr. Paneros, Tony stood in his kitchen making breakfast, something that would have been unimaginable during those dark weeks when even the thought of food made him sick. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Tony confided to Dale over morning coffee. "It seems too good to be true that I can feel this normal again." But normal was exactly what Tony had become, with one important difference. He now lived with diabetes, a consequence of losing 2/3 of his pancreas. The remaining 30% of the organ was working overtime to produce the insulin his body needed, but it wasn't quite enough on its own. Dr. Paneros had prepared them for this reality during their last appointment. "Tony, your pancreas plays 2 crucial roles," he had explained. "It produces enzymes that help you digest food, and it produces insulin that regulates your blood sugar. With only 30% of the organ remaining, you'll need to take insulin daily, but otherwise, you should be able to live a completely normal life." The diabetes diagnosis had initially worried Tony, but as he learned to manage his blood sugar levels, he realized it was a small price to pay for being alive and healthy. His daily routine now included checking his glucose levels and administering insulin, tasks that quickly became as automatic as brushing his teeth. "I thought I'd be on some severely restricted diet for the rest of my life," Tony told Dr. Paneros during a follow-up appointment. "I was preparing myself to give up all the foods I love." Dr. Paneros laughed. "Tony, you can eat whatever you want, just don't go overboard. Your remaining pancreas is working beautifully, and with insulin management, there's no reason you can't enjoy food the way you always have." The only real sacrifice Tony had to make was giving up his occasional glass of wine or beer. "Because you're diabetic now, alcohol can cause unpredictable changes in your blood sugar," Dr. Paneros explained. "It's safer to avoid it altogether." Tony accepted this limitation without complaint. After facing the possibility of death or major surgery, giving up alcohol felt like the easiest trade-off in the world. As his strength returned, Tony began to reclaim the activities he loved. He started taking long walks around his neighborhood, something he had been unable to do for months. He returned to reading voraciously, his mind sharp and engaged again. Most importantly, he began to dream about the future instead of merely surviving the present. Dale watched her husband's transformation with amazement and profound gratitude. The man who had been unable to hold a cell phone was now helping her plan their garden for the following spring. The man who couldn't keep down clear broth was now experimenting with new recipes he wanted to try. "Dr. Paneros gave me my life back," Tony reflected. "But more than that, he gave me hope when everyone else was talking about doom and gloom." The regular monitoring appointments became celebrations of Tony's continued health rather than fearful checkups. His blood work showed stable enzyme levels, his scans revealed no new complications, and his quality of life measurements consistently scored in the excellent range. With his health stabilized and his confidence restored, Tony began to look toward the horizon again, dreaming of places he wanted to see and experiences he thought he might never have. 1 year after his collapse in the emergency room, Tony Raffaaniello was doing something he thought he might never do again. He was planning a trip. Not just any trip, but the Italian vacation that had been interrupted by his medical crisis, now reimagined as a celebration of survival and recovery. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Dale asked as they looked at cruise brochures spread across their kitchen table. "It's a big trip," and we'd be far from Dr. Pinero's if anything goes wrong. Tony looked at his wife, understanding her concerns, but feeling more confident than he had in years. Dale, I can't live my life afraid of what might happen. Dr. Pinero's has cleared me for travel, my diabetes is well controlled, and honestly, I need to prove to myself that I'm really back. Dr. Pinero's had indeed cleared Tony for international travel, with a few practical precautions. Take extra insulin supplies, keep your emergency contact information with you, and know where the nearest hospitals are located, he had advised. But Tony, you're in excellent health. There's no reason you shouldn't live exactly the life you want to live. The planning process itself became therapeutic. Tony researched restaurants in Rome, studied maps of Sicilian coastal towns, and imagined walking through ancient streets that had survived for millennia, much like he had survived his own battle. I want to eat authentic carbonara in Rome, Tony announced one evening, consulting his travel guidebooks. And I want to try real Sicilian cannoli. Dr. Pinero's said I can eat whatever I want as long as I'm smart about it. Dale smiled, seeing the enthusiasm that had been missing from her husband's eyes for so long. This wasn't just about taking a vacation. It was about reclaiming the dreams that illness had stolen from them. The trip was everything they had hoped for and more. Tony managed his diabetes carefully, checking his blood sugar regularly, and adjusting his insulin as needed. He ate gelato in Florence, savored fresh pasta in Naples, and enjoyed wine-free dinners that were nonetheless perfect celebrations of life and love. On their cruise around Sicily, Tony stood on the ship's deck watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in shades of gold and orange. Dale joined him, and together they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "A year ago, I was fighting for my life," Tony said quietly. "Now I'm here, watching the sunset over waters that have seen thousands of years of history. Dr. Pinero's didn't just save my pancreas, he saved my dreams." The vacation photos told the story of a man reborn. Tony's smile was genuine, his posture strong, his eyes bright with the joy of someone who had stared death in the face and emerged victorious. In every picture, he looked like a person who understood the true value of each moment. When they returned home, Tony's friends and family were amazed by his transformation. He had gained back healthy weight, his complexion was robust, and his energy levels were those of a man half his age. "People keep asking me what the secret is," Tony told Dr. Pinero's during his post-travel checkup. "I tell them it's having a doctor who refuses to accept defeat and a body that's more resilient than I ever imagined." Dr. Pinero's reviewed Tony's latest test results with satisfaction. "Your pancreas function remains stable, your diabetes is beautifully controlled, and frankly, you're healthier now than many people who've never had a health crisis." As Tony settled back into his post-vacation routine, both he and Dr. Pinero's realized that his case had become something special, not just a medical success story, but a beacon of hope for others facing similar diagnoses. 2 years after his initial collapse, Tony Raffaaniello had become something he never expected to be, an inspiration to other patients facing pancreatic diseases. Dr. Pinero's began sharing Tony's story, with his permission, as an example of what was possible with advanced minimally invasive techniques and a patient's determination to heal. "Mr. Raffaaniello, I'd like you to consider speaking with other patients," Dr. Pinero's suggested during one of Tony's routine checkups. "Your recovery has been remarkable, and I think your story could give hope to people who are where you were 2 years ago." Tony was initially hesitant. "Doctor, I'm not a medical expert. I'm just a retired teacher and coach who got lucky enough to find you." "That's exactly why your story is so powerful," Dr. Pinero's replied. "You speak their language. You understand the fear, the uncertainty, the feeling that your life is over. And you're living proof that it's not." So Tony began meeting with newly diagnosed patients, sharing his experience with the honesty and directness that had served him well as an educator. He talked about the terror of waking up unable to move, the despair of thinking his life was effectively over, and the gradual return to not just health, but joy. The hardest part wasn't the physical recovery, Tony would tell these patients. It was believing that I could have a normal life again. Dr. Pinero's didn't just treat my pancreas, he treated my hope. One patient, a woman in her 50s named Margaret, broke down crying after hearing Tony's story. "I thought I'd never be able to eat normally again," she said. "I thought I'd never be able to travel or enjoy life. 2 years ago, I thought the same thing," Tony replied. "Now I eat whatever I want, I travel wherever I want to go, and the only real difference in my life is that I take insulin and I appreciate every single day in a way I never did before." These conversations became as therapeutic for Tony as they were helpful for the patients. Each person he met reminded him of his own journey and reinforced his gratitude for Dr. Paneros's care. Dr. Paneros watched these interactions with professional satisfaction and personal joy. "Tony has become our best ambassador," he told his medical team. "He shows patients what's possible when we combine advanced medical techniques with a patient's own determination to heal." The medical community began taking notice of Tony's case as well. Dr. Paneros presented their collaborative success at medical conferences, demonstrating how minimally invasive techniques could achieve results that traditional surgery might not have been able to accomplish with the same quality of life outcomes. "This case represents the future of pancreatic medicine," Dr. Paneros told his colleagues. "We're not just keeping patients alive, we're helping them thrive." For Tony, the opportunity to help others became another unexpected gift from his medical journey. "If my story can help even one person believe that they can get through this, then everything I went through was worth it," he reflected. Today, 3 years after that terrifying morning when Tony Raffaaniello collapsed in an emergency room, he lives a life that exceeds even his pre-illness expectations. His diabetes is perfectly controlled, his remaining pancreatic function is stable, and his quality of life is, in his own words, terrific. Tony and Dale have taken 2 more international trips, exploring Greece and the Turkish coast. They're planning a visit to Japan for the following year. Tony eats adventurously, exercises regularly, and approaches each day with the wisdom that comes only from having faced mortality and emerged victorious. Dr. Paneros continues to monitor Tony's case, but their appointments have transformed from medical necessities into celebrations of sustained health. "Tony represents everything we hope to achieve in medicine," Dr. Paneros reflects. "We don't just treat diseases, we restore lives." The key lesson of Tony's story isn't just medical, it's profoundly human. When faced with a diagnosis that seems to signal the end of normal life, hope remains possible. When traditional approaches seem inadequate, innovation can create new pathways to healing. And when a patient meets a physician who refuses to accept defeat, miracles can happen in the most ordinary examination rooms. For anyone facing a serious medical diagnosis, Tony's message is simple but powerful. Don't let anyone convince you that your situation is hopeless. Find the doctor who specializes in your condition, ask questions, seek second opinions, and never stop believing that you can get better. Tony Raffaaniello went from having a disappearing pancreas to having a life that's fuller and more meaningful than ever before. His story reminds us that sometimes the worst thing that happens to us can become the doorway to our greatest growth, our deepest gratitude, and our most authentic joy. As Tony says with a smile that lights up his entire face, it really isn't all doom and gloom, even when your pancreas is disappearing. Sometimes, losing something forces you to discover just how strong and resilient you really are.